Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, stocks are continuing their recovery from Monday's massive sell-off, with futures higher following yesterday's 1% gain for the S&P 500. All major groups in the index rose. Still, Stifel chief economist Lindsay Piegza says there is major concern about the health of the U.S. economy.
Well, I think the risk of recession is still very real. I would put it in double-digit territory, around 25 to 30% when we look out to 2025 and beyond. But my bigger concern is not that the U.S. economy falls into negative territory or an outright recession, but the notion that we allow the economy to slow, but the Fed continues to tolerate above-target inflation.
Stifel chief economist Lindsay Piegza and traders are moderating expectations of deep Fed rate cuts this year. Swaps point to around 105 basis points of easing. That compares to as much as 150 basis points on Monday.
Well, Nathan, Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon says markets should not count on the Fed stepping in with an emergency rate cut. In an upcoming episode of the David Rubenstein Show Peer-to-Peer Conversations, Solomon said he doubts the Fed would act before September.
The market expectation is certainly for cuts in the fall. I've been more cautious around interest rate cuts all year. As you remember, the market expectation early in the year was for 6 or 7 cuts. Based on the economic data we're seeing now and the messaging from the Fed, I think it's likely that we'll see a cut or two in the fall. But I think you've still got to wait and see as things unfold.
And Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon added the stock market correction might be healthy, and he forecasts more volatility to come.
In Asia, Karen, Japanese stocks rose more than 1%. A Bank of Japan official sent a strong dovish signal by pledging to refrain from hiking interest rates when markets are unstable. Those words follow major moves in the yen and record-breaking swings in Japanese stocks following last week's rate hike. Nomura's executive officer and head of wholesale, Christopher Wilcox, defended the BOJ.
I would say that the BOJ has been completely vindicated. They always knew that this unwind was going to be very difficult. That's why they've been so slow and so cautious. And yes, that puts some pressure on the yen for a little while. And think about the carry trade. The point of the carry trade is that if they didn't start to move, the carry trade would only have got bigger. The end disruption of the unwinding of the carry trade would have been even bigger. So I think the BOJ is playing it extremely smartly.
Nomura's Christopher Wilcox says the 3-day meltdown in Japan's stocks adds up to $1.1 trillion wiped out. That is the equivalent of Sweden's entire stock market.
Well, Nathan, we'll have more on the markets in just a moment. But now let's get to the latest in the presidential race. Democratic nominee Kamala Harris has introduced her new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, at a rally in swing state Pennsylvania.
A leader who will help unite our nation and move us forward. A fighter for the middle class.
And Governor Walz came out fighting against former President Donald Trump.
He froze in the face of the COVID crisis. He drove our economy into the ground. And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed.
Now, Governor Walz is a favorite of progressives and organized labor, but former Democratic National Committee CEO Amy Dacey says the party is rallying behind him.
You saw, a sense of energy and optimism that you haven't seen, for a while with the Democratic ticket. If you're going to advise them, it's that keep the authenticity, listen as well as speak, make sure that you're out there and understanding people's pain.
Former DNC chief Amy Dacey notes both progressive Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and centrist Joe Manchin are backing Walz. The Harris campaign says it raised $20 million after she announced her running mate. And a new poll from NPR, PBS News, and Marist College now has Harris leading Trump nationally, 51% to 48%.
Well, one other political note this morning, Nathan. Cori Bush lost a bitter primary battle, further shrinking the squad of House progressives. The Missouri Democrat is an outspoken critic of Israel's handling of the war in Gaza. She lost to St. Louis County prosecuting attorney Wesley Bell. According to the Associated Press, with 94% of votes counted, Bell had 51% support, compared with about 46% for Bush.
All right, let's return to markets now, Karen, where shares of the maker of a blockbuster weight loss drug are slimming down in trading. Novo Nordisk is down more than 3%. For more, let's go to Europe and check in with Bloomberg's Ewan Potts in London. Ewan.
Nathan and Karen, it's Europe's most valuable company, but Novo Nordisk has disappointed investors this morning. Revenue from weight loss treatment Wegovy's been hit by higher than expected price concessions in the US, its most important market. Novo called it a one-off factor, but the size of the shortfall is raising concerns among investors about growing competition from American rival Eli Lilly. The market for obesity drugs is expected to reach $130 billion by the end of the decade, but it's clear Novo Nordisk will need to fight for market share. In London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ewan, thank you. Well, here in the U.S., Airbnb investors are checking out this morning. Shares are down about 16%. The company gave a disappointing outlook for a third consecutive quarter. It's also warning of slowing demand from U.S. vacationers, a sign that travel momentum is tapering off despite the peak summer season.
And Karen, shares of Supermicro Computer are down more than 12%. That company reported quarterly revenue and profit that missed analyst estimates. We get the numbers from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
It outweighs an annual sales outlook that was billions above Wall Street projections. Profit, excluding some items, $6.25 a share, short of Supermicro's previous forecast and the $8.25 average analyst estimate. A jump in demand for the equipment that powers artificial intelligence training and applications has helped drive sales at Supermicro, which makes data center servers. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Charlie, thank you. On the flip side, shares of Lumen Technologies are soaring more than 42%. The company, which provides fiber networks for artificial intelligence data processing, says a surge in demand is leading to a surge in sales. Lumen also boosted its full-year free cash flow forecast to $1 to $1.2 billion. It previously saw $100 to $300 million. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
And Karen, a flood watch has now been lifted for the city after as much as 5 inches of rain in just several hours left many streets, homes, and businesses in the tri-state inundated. Last night, a cold front triggered severe storms. New York City officials, for the first time, were using a drone to transmit emergency weather alerts to residents.
Be prepared to leave your location if flooding occurs. Do not hesitate.
Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn tells us we'll get just a temporary break.
Well, we saw anywhere from 1.5 inches of rain over portions of the city to as much as 5 inches in parts of Connecticut and New Jersey. The good news is that system is pulling out this morning. Rain moves out of the region very early on, and we'll see drier conditions. Unfortunately, though, moisture from Debbie is going to bring rain back into the tri-state area later tonight, and we'll see it again tomorrow and into Friday. John?
The New York Post says a handful of people had to be rescued from their cars after rising water trapped them in the Henry Hudson Parkway and the Major Deegan Expressway. Hamas has named the alleged mastermind of the group's October 7 attack on Israel as its new political leader. He succeeds a key mediator whose assassination last week has set back the ceasefire talks. New York State voters support banning smartphones in classrooms by a wide margin. More from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
According to a poll from Siena College, voters back a school smartphone ban by 60% to 32%. There is growing nationwide concern that the devices distract from learning. New York City Schools Chancellor David Banks said he plans an across-the-board ban on mobile phones. Governor Kathy Hochul said she intends to propose a statewide ban in schools during the 2025 legislative session. Some New York schools that already have bans in place have seen positive results, including increased grades. Jeff Bellinger, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan and Karen.
All right, John, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The Mets signed a couple of free agents, starting pitchers in the offseason. Sean Manaea has been really good. Luis Severino, the ex-Yankee, not so much. Especially lately, Severino's ERA in July was near 6. First start of August took the loss in Denver. The Rockies won 6-3. Yankees rained out at the stadium. Straight doubleheader with the Angels today, starting at 4. When Baltimore lost in Toronto, it put the Yanks into sole possession of first by a half game. The White Sox had not won a game since July 10th. A 21-game losing streak ended in Oakland. Chicago won 5-1, raising its season record to 28 and 88. Houston Astros got a no-hitter early this season from Manel Blanco. They got one last season from Framber Valdez. Valdez in Texas was one out from another no-hitter. The Rangers' Kyle Seager broke it up with a home run. 3 gold medals won by U.S. athletes. Anit Elor, only 20 years old. She's the youngest American to win gold in women's wrestling. She outscored her opponents by a combined 34-2. Track and field, Cole Hocker, upset win in the 1,500 meters. Gabby Thomas took the 200. She had competed in Tokyo when there were no fans. Not the case in Paris.
There is nothing like walking into a stadium of 80,000 people and they're screaming and they're right on top of you. That is a lot of pressure to put on someone and a lot of pressure for us to kind of deal with. So it was definitely very different, but it made it a lot more special when I crossed the line as a champion because I got to share that experience with everyone. I got to hear the crowd roar.
Men's basketball, easy quarterfinal win over Brazil, 122-87. Next up, Serbia tomorrow in the semifinals. Next up for the U.S. women's soccer, gold medal game Saturday against Brazil in both the quarterfinals and the semis against Germany. The U.S. won 1-0, both times scoring the only goal in extra time. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports, Karen Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Vice President Kamala Harris is kicking off a crucial stage of her presidential campaign with her new running mate in tow. And Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is already coming out swinging against Republicans Donald Trump and J.D. Vance in his first appearance as running mate in Philadelphia. Joining us now is Tina Fordham, founder and geopolitical strategist at Fordham Global Foresight. Tina, it's great to speak with you again this morning. Vice President Harris introduced Governor Walz as a fighter for the middle class. Of course, he's been credited with coining the term weird that seems to be resonating among Democrats when it comes to messaging against the Republican ticket. What's your reaction to his introduction now to a national audience?
You know, it was fascinating to watch the scenes at the rally in Philadelphia. There was a lot of energy. There was a very interesting, I think, very positive chemistry between Harris and Walz. And, you know, like a lot of people, I didn't know much about him until his name got on the short list. But he's got an interesting story. But more than anything, his way of framing the issues, I think, is really landing. The weird idea is just one of those mechanisms, but also his plain spokenness.
Is that going to be enough, the weird messaging, to go after Trump and the Republicans?
You know, speaking from a political science point of view, it can be a very effective tool for marginalizing your opponent. You know, there are those who would say that using humor or satire is childish. I don't agree. And also, it works a lot better than Biden's apocalyptic rhetoric, which really didn't move people.
Now, as a governor, as a former congressman, he does have a record. He supported free school meals, paid family leave as governor of Pennsylvania. He has kind of a nuanced stance when it comes to China. He's got a long history as a former teacher there. Could those be vulnerabilities for Governor Walz?
I mean, anything, it can be a vulnerability in this day and age where, you know, people can dredge up something that was said decades ago. He's a vice president. He's not running as a president. He's not there to bring foreign policy cred to the ticket. This is a very unusual race. It doesn't necessarily need to be said. They're starting late in the game. And I think what Walz brings to the ticket is a lot of energy, you know, his kind of football coach approach to going on offense. And let's see how it resonates with voters if they want to be part of this. And it's also a generational changing of the guard. You know, they're both 60, which is young in this race, as it has been so far.
Yeah, interesting to think of 60 as young now, considering where presidential races have been in the past, other than Trump and Biden, I suppose. But, of course, Governor Walz has already come out as a favorite of progressives and blue-collar workers. Was Vice President Harris really at risk of losing that part of the Biden coalition without bringing in someone like Walz? Did she miss an opportunity by not picking someone with more centrist appeal like Josh Shapiro or Mark Kelly?
I mean, if you look at the data, the electoral college, power of a vice presidential candidate hasn't amounted to much since, probably Al Gore and the state of Tennessee. And so we're talking about 0.04%. And what's more, this whole political beauty pageant that the Democrats have been through have really put people like Josh Shapiro, obviously Pete Buttigieg, who already was in the cabinet, Kelly and others much more prominently. So there is a sense that, there's a lot of talent on the Democratic side to be mobilized for this. I don't think that the fact that Josh Shapiro isn't on the ticket means that Harris is less likely to get Pennsylvania. The other thing that's interesting about Walz, of course, that's less quantitative, is that he has won in red districts and in formerly red states. So that is powerful too when it comes to the idea of persuasion, and that's what the Harris-Walz ticket has to do fast to not only rebuild, as much of the Biden and maybe even the Obama coalition, but to persuade the disgruntled independents and undecided.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.